Inside the People's Court by John Sylvester takes a critical approach blending crime and justice which leaves you with motion sickness. For a shorthand piece, it shows that not one answer is ever enough, nor can a single verdict explain the systematic desperation that enters any courtroom each day. Observing Deputy Chief Magistrate Yelena Popovic as she triages case after case reveals a justice system under immense strain. This reflection responds to four key questions about the magistrates' court. Challenges and pressures faced by magistrates. Do operational strains across clinical placements and occupational exemptions expose a welfare framework on the brink of collapse? This systemic saturation forces a critical re-evaluation of who the legal apparatus admits and who it shields. Driven by aggressive policing, rigid bail criteria, and harsher sentencing, a massive influx of arrests has transformed the magistrates' court into a volatile bottleneck between conviction and incarceration. Instead of operating as a dynamic roundabout filtering individuals toward rehabilitation, the bench is overwhelmed by 250,000 annual matters, including 120,000 intervention orders and 60,000 warrants. This volume transforms a forum meant for reasoned adjudication into a volatile bottleneck on the superhighway between crime and punishment, where the basic components required for balanced decisions simply fail to arrive. In the so-called superior courts, the accused is legally represented, the brief of evidence long completed and counsel usually well prepared. If the Supreme Court sometimes has the etiquette of the Melbourne Club, then the magistrates is the legal version of a mosh pit. Potential implications of these challenges and pressures for both magistrates and offenders. Ultimately, justice in this environment is dispensed not as a deliberate, individual process, but as a rapid exercise in institutional survival that exacts a devastating toll on its practitioners. The crushing operational velocity and intense public scrutiny, often fueled by misconceptions that the bench is out of touch, have created a high-stakes, destabilizing workplace where magistrates must make instantaneous, life-altering decisions amidst missing counsel and chaotic, kitchen-like back orders of paperwork. This persistent pressure has triggered a mental health crisis within the judiciary, exemplified by the tragic suicides of magistrates like Stephen Mayall in 2018 and the subsequent mandating of compulsory counseling days to manage the sheer trauma of the bench. Observing this relentless schedule reveals that frontline adjudication operates less like a textbook tribunal and more like a high-pressure emergency ward processing social fractures. Rather than standard legal mechanics, the bench relies on split-second clinical intuition to parse an ever-changing landscape of human wreckage. On any given morning, the gallery shifts from the startling reality of an affluent Elwood youth seduced by the dark glamour of the illicit market, to an unhoused shoplifter whose brief sentence is calculated purely to secure temporary shelter before an accommodation window slams shut. The docket moves through jagged contrasts. A distressed arson suspect claiming physical illness who must be immediately diverted to an on-site psychiatric expert, followed by an overconfident fraudster whose father offers a $40,000 surety while the partner struggles to explain the vague mechanics of his direct sales enterprise. This administrative whirlwind is routinely stalled by structural failures. Like missing transport vans that force legal aid to scramble, or absent defendants whose skipped appearances drain 30,000 operational police shifts annually just to track them down. Yet, the most toxic tension comes from outside the walls, where a vocal, hostile public frequently brands the judiciary as insulated and lenient. This mismatch between outside perception and inside trauma extracts a grim, ultimate price. When the compounding strain drives colleagues to the absolute brink, it forces leadership to implement mandatory psychological interventions and plead for immediate government reinforcements. It leaves an unmistakable impression of an exhausted, antiquated apparatus running on empty. where the thin line between order and collapse is held together entirely by the grit of an individual typing away under the weight of an endless stack of folders. Overall impressions of how justice is dispensed in the magistrates' court. Viewed through a broader lens, the frantic triage within the magistrates' court serves as a macro-level diagnostic of our contemporary legal architecture, exposing a system that has effectively outsourced deep societal failures to an administrative conveyor belt. When the primary entry point of the judiciary is reduced to summary pragmatism, it signals that the broader legal system values institutional production over deliberate, individualized adjudication. This frontline reality reveals an uncomfortable structural truth. The criminal courts have become a blunt force catchment zone for poverty, homelessness, systemic addiction, and acute psychiatric crises. Consequently, justice is dispensed not as a clean, textbook application of statutory elements, but as a form of rapid social triage. Magistrates are forced to operate as makeshift social workers and crisis managers rather than detached, formal arbiters of law. How the means through which justice is dispensed within the magistrates' court reflect on our system of justice more broadly. The operational realities of summary jurisdiction expose a deeper systemic reliance on net widening as a substitute for proactive governance. By filtering the vast majority of legal friction through a hyper-accelerated lower court, the broader legal system successfully isolates the chaotic reality of systemic inequality away from the pristine, precedent-setting superior courts. This structural quarantine reveals that the appearance of a meticulous, rights-respecting constitutional democracy relies entirely on a hidden foundation of rapid-fire, low-visibility pleas. Furthermore, this dynamic demonstrates how modern governance uses the criminal justice apparatus to criminalize survival strategies born from legislative failures in housing and health care. The perpetual bottleneck at the absolute baseline of the judiciary ultimately reflects a system that preserves the ideological myth of perfect blind justice for the few, by structurally institutionalizing a highly compromised, assembly line version for the marginalized majority. References